When does a man bites dog scenario become a dog bites man scenario? How often, for example, does something have to happen before it stops being remarkable, extraordinary and newsworthy and becomes instead rather commonplace? How many times a year or 3 years would we need to change prime ministers before it stops being a moment of epic import? Quite remarkable to reflect that we're now on to our fourth in 6 years. With the three previous ones having essentially been banjaxed by a bloke called Boris Johnson. David Cameron was banjaxed by Boris Johnson's Brexit shenanigans. Theresa May was banjaxed by Boris Johnson's Brexit shenanigans. Boris Johnson was banjaxed by Boris Johnson's myriad shenanigans. And Liz Truss quite possibly will be banjaxed by Boris Johnson's shenanigans. A man so supremely self-absorbed, so spectacularly arrogant, so epically self-obsessed that he really would trash an entire country in pursuit of short-term gratification. There can be little doubt of that now. Well, at least in the minds of people who are not cultish in their outlooks, people who are, I don't quite what the word is, people who've got their eyes open. Is that a fair way of putting it? How you can look at the last 3 years of government and conclude anything other than, well, not that we dodged a bullet, we categorically didn't dodge a bullet, but with a tiny bit of luck, it's going to prove possibly to be a flesh wound or just a loss of a limb as opposed to a fatal blow to the body politic. Wherever you begin, we spent 3 hours on Friday trying to put together a catalogue of this man's calumnies, catastrophes, scandals, lies and corruptions, and we barely touched the sides. Well, actually, that's not fair. I'm being unkind to you. We did touch the sides, but we definitely missed a couple out. And we were only talking about his career as Prime Minister. We didn't touch upon his time as London Mayor, when huge sums of public money mysteriously found their ways into the pockets of one of his myriad mistresses. We didn't talk about his time as Foreign Secretary, when his most memorable intervention saw a British citizen incarcerated in Iran have her situation made even worse by Boris Johnson. I mean, everything he touched turned to shocking amounts of sewage. It's breathtaking when you think about it. And today, I have to say, is hilarious. I've heard some people, I actually heard someone with a straight face this morning describe Boris Johnson as incredibly hardworking. This is a man who missed 5 Cobra meetings at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak because he was reportedly working on a book he still hasn't finished. Incredibly hardworking. He's always described as a brilliant orator, which he just isn't. As you saw at PMQs, he reaches for the most filthy insults and lies from the darkest recesses of far-right social media in order to try to land punches on his opponents when he's got his back against the wall. The man's a coward. He's a monstrous, bullying coward, which is why he's surrounded himself with monsters, bullies and cowards. Priti Patel being one of the first to resign, and someone who probably fits all three of those categorisations. Nadine Dorries, the second reportedly to resign. Monstrous, bullying cowards attract monsters, bullies and cowards. You can write that down, stick it on an epigram, make it into a T-shirt. But of course he may not be gone forever, because if you can say anything about a monstrous bullying coward with an ego the size of the Mersey Tunnel, then you can say that he will already be massaging his own ego and plotting some sort of return to prominence, not because he's got any interest in the country or any commitment to the national cause, but solely because the only thing commensurate with his opinion of himself is the biggest job in the country. It's the only thing that he considers to be worthy of what he considers to be his epic and myriad talents. And that makes sense. That makes sense. There's nothing too mysterious about one person who is pathetic, bullying, deceitful, adulterous, depraved, corrupt, all of those things, believing that he's a genius. What is a mystery through time is when people who fit that category, when you're looking at some of the nastiest dictators in history, or whether you're looking at some of the most accomplished con men, what is astonishing is the people they persuade to subscribe to a similar worldview. So if I stood up now in front of you and said, I am an Olympic standard sprinter, I am better at science than Stephen Hawking, and I am a better computer whiz than Bill Gates, I would probably be carted away. But if I was possessed of the skill set that Boris Johnson has, then by 10:30 this morning, a significant number of people currently listening to this programme would believe me. And I find that absolutely fascinating. I truly do. The idea that snake oil salesmen need snake oil buyers. Floggers of nonsense need buyers of nonsense. Purveyors of crud and propaganda need swallowers of crud and propaganda. And Boris Johnson has found so many and continues to. That perhaps is the mystery that will concern us first this morning. The idea that even now, while some of the people that were carrying the prime ministerial carriage on their shoulders have finally started shouting that the prime minister is actually naked. Some of them. There's about 50, was it, in the end? How many people actually resigned from the last government in order to protest Boris Johnson's corrupt behaviour? The people carrying, what do you call it, like a giant sedan chair. Is there a word for an enormous sedan chair? Like a sedan chair has like 4 people on it, but I mean like a sedan sofa. I mean like a piece of furniture that is carried on the shoulders of 100 human beings, with Nadine Dorries walking in front, waving a little flag and playing a kazoo. And as this ridiculous parade makes its way through the body politic of the British Isles, slowly but surely some people carrying the naked Prime Minister began to notice the nakedness of his buttocks. And although they were minded to ignore it for a while, eventually it became impossible to turn a blind eye to. And so it was that Rishi Sunak finally went, "The Prime Minister's got no clothes on," followed swiftly by Sajid Javid, who bellowed, "The Prime Minister's got no clothes on," and it began to spread among all the people carrying the sedan chair. This little cry went up one by one by one. "The Prime Minister's got no clothes on," until eventually so many people had clocked the fact that the fellow was stark rollock naked and therefore removed their shoulder from the sedan sofa that was carrying him through the country, that the sofa fell to the floor and the naked Prime Minister rolled off his seat and landed in the gutter, while claiming throughout that he had been done for by dark forces. And all of the people still insisting, as he lay there naked and writhing in the flotsam and jetsam of political disgrace, they were still queuing up to claim he was a genius, to claim that he was hard-working, to claim that he had got all the big calls right. There he is, on the pavement in a fetal position, wibbling at the moon about how unfair it is that he's finally been held out accountable for his own actions, and still they queue up to tell you how hard-working he was and how much he will be missed, and how the chief kazoo blower Nadine Dorries will leave an enormous hole in British politics. And the rest of us, it's called a palanquin, apparently, the item of furniture that I'm looking for. I have said it before, and I will say it again. I have the most erudite and knowledgeable listeners in the history of speech radio. So Boris fell off his palanquin, writhing naked in the gutter, while people like Nadine Dorries and some of the guests on Nick's show this morning queued up to tell you that he was still berobed in splendid garments, that he was still the best dressed giant in town, smartest giant in town. And the rest of us, those of us who were at the back of the queue, those of us who were at the back of the crowd, even for me by late 2008, shouting, "He hasn't got any clothes on. He hasn't got any clothes on." We stand here today marvelling at two things. Number one, how long it took. My God, how long it took. But number two, the people still blowing their kazoos. The people still waving their little flags, tugging their little forelocks. The client journalists queuing up to pretend that he didn't preside over catastrophe after corruption, after calumny. The colleagues claiming that he's anything other than an appalling scar upon the history of our democracy, who was quite prepared to undermine all of its most important foundation stones solely to survive for another day. Standards? Poof. Ethics? Meh. Parliamentary procedure? Nah. Rule of law? Nah. International law? Boo. Whatever it is, you name it, he'd have trashed it. He'd have tossed it in the bin like a used Kleenex. And yet here they are, queuing up to tell you that he's been poorly treated, that he is a man more sinned against than sinning. It is frankly incredible. It is demonstrably absurd. And it is, in the context of the last 6 years of British politics, quite possibly inevitable. Holy McMoly, eh? And on they go. To the extent that there are already reportedly a dozen MPs ready to submit letters of no confidence in Liz Truss because they're so keen to bring the great blonde buffoon back to the forefront of British politics. And there are confused, it's a bit like when a boy band breaks up, isn't it? And you have all these wailing, weeping 13-year-old girls who think that their universe has come crashing to an end. Oh my God, they've broken up. I don't believe it. Oh, and there it is. That is Boris Johnson's legacy, Boris Johnson's premiership, Boris Johnson's contribution to public life. So we'll have a chat today about the people who, here's one, David Morgan has just texted. It says, you sound ridiculous, at Mr. James O.B. So we'll have a chat today about people like David Morgan, people who've watched the naked emperor be paraded through the country, watched him fall off his palanquin because his former palanquin bearers have finally acknowledged the nakedness of his ludicrous quivering buttocks, and as each one walks away, so the palanquin gets wobblier until the point that he falls off it and ends up writhing in a muddy gutter. And people like David Morgan think that the people who told you the bloke was naked a decade ago are the ones that have been rendered ridiculous. That's how cults work. And our friend there is clearly a complete cult. So after the break, we will have a listen to that farewell speech, largely because it happened so early. I think I was still in bed. Also, back to school day today. I had more important things to be getting on with. So we'll listen to it together, in my case, for the very first time. We'll pick over the bones of it a little bit, and then we will look at the vexed question, which I'm not, I'm afraid, confident enough yet to say we will never have to ask again, because a bit like, you know, Nosferatu or zombie movies, every time you think that the villain of the piece has been consigned to eternal oblivion, there's a slight change of angle. The music starts up in the background, and the corpse becomes reanimated. The vampire gets back out of the coffin. The zombie steps out of the darkness and resumes the pursuit of the public. So there it is. We will have a listen to the farewell speech together. Shall we count the lies in it? I don't know if there are any. Perhaps I'm being a little bit unfair. It might be the first time in his life he's managed to speak for 7 minutes without lying. We'll find out. And then we'll have a look at the vexed question of just how many people continue to believe that the moon is made of cheese, that Brexit is a good idea, and that Boris Johnson was a politician worthy of high office. At 7:30 this morning, Boris Johnson delivered his farewell speech as Prime Minister. I thought we'd take a moment to listen to it together. I'm going to resist the urge to do a Graham Norton-style commentary over the top. At least I will begin by resisting the urge to do a Graham Norton-style commentary over the top. But I do think between us we should be able to keep track of exaggerations, embellishments, or perhaps even downright lies. Are you ready? So here it is.
Morning. Thank you. Well, this is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And through that lacquered black door, a new Prime Minister will shortly go to meet a fantastic group of public servants. The people who got Brexit done. The people who delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and never forget, 70% of the entire population got a dose within 6 months faster than any comparable country. That is government for you. That's this Conservative government. People who organised those prompt early supplies of weapons to the heroic Ukrainian armed forces, an action that may very well have helped change the course of the biggest European war for 80 years. And because of the speed and urgency of what you did, everybody involved in this government, to get this economy moving again from July last year, in spite of all the opposition, all the naysayers, we have and will continue to have that economic strength to give people the cash they need to get through this energy crisis that has been caused by Putin's vicious war. And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it, and we will win. And if Putin thinks that he can succeed by blackmailing or bullying the British people, then he is utterly deluded. And the reason we will have those funds now and in the future is because we Conservatives understand the vital symmetry between government action and free market, capitalist, private sector enterprise. We're delivering on those huge manifesto commitments, making streets safer, neighbourhood crime down 38% in the last 3 years, 13,790 more police on the streets, building more hospitals, and yes, we will have 50,000 more nurses by the end of the decade, and 40 more hospitals by the end of 50,000 nurses by the end of this Parliament, I should say. 40 new hospitals by the end of the decade. Putting record funding into our schools and into teachers' pay, giving everybody over 18 a lifetime skills guarantee so they can keep upskilling throughout their lives. 3 new high-speed rail lines, 3, including Northern Powerhouse Rail, colossal road programs from the Pennines to Cornwall, the rollout of gigabit broadband up over the last 3 years, I am proud to say, since you were kind enough to elect me, from 7% of our country's premises having gigabit broadband to 70% today. And we are, of course, providing the short and the long-term solutions for our energy needs, and not just using more of our own domestic hydrocarbons, but going up by 2030 to 50 gigawatts of wind power. That is half this country's electricity needs from offshore wind alone. A new nuclear reactor every year. And looking at what is happening in this country, the changes that are taking place, that is why private sector investment is flooding in. More private sector, more venture capital investment than China itself. More billion-pound tech companies sprouting here in the UK than in France, Germany and Israel combined. And as a result, unemployment, as I leave office, unemployment down to lows not seen since I was about 10 years old and bouncing around on a space hopper, my friends. And on the subject of bouncing around in future careers, let me say that I am now like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled its function, and I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere and splashing down invisibly in some remote and obscure corner of the Pacific. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough. And I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support. This is, I'll tell you why, this is a tough time for the economy. This is a tough time for families up and down the country. We can and we will get through it, and we will come out stronger the other side. But I say to my fellow Conservatives, it's time for politics to be over, folks. It's time for us all to get behind Liz Truss and her team and her programme and deliver for the people of this country. Because that is what the people of this country want, that's what they need, and that's what they deserve. I'm proud to have discharged the promises I made to my party when you were kind enough to choose me. Winning the biggest majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. Delivering Brexit, delivering our manifesto commitments, including, by the way, including social care, reforming social care, helping people up and down the country, ensuring that Britain is once again standing tall in the world. speaking with clarity and authority from Ukraine to the AUKUS pact with America and Australia. Because we are one whole and entire united kingdom whose diplomats, security services and armed forces are so globally admired. And by the way, as I leave, I believe our union is so strong that those who want to break it up, they'll keep trying, but they will never, ever succeed. Thank you to everybody behind me in this building. Thank you to all of you in government. Thank you to everybody who's helped look after me and my family over the last 3 years, including Dylan, the dog. And I just say to my party, if Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party. Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve, all of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together, paving the path of prosperity now and for future generations. And I will be supporting Liz Truss and the new government every step of the way. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
To temporarily channel the great Joe Lycett, I am very right-wing. And I thought that was a brilliant speech. I thought that he told unvarnished truths. His list of his achievements was absolutely unimpeachable. That 40 new hospitals are practically completed. The fact that the police figures he announced are not even filling the hole left by previous Conservative administrations is the sort of detail that the haters would pick up on. The fact that we're currently 5th on the European League table of vaccine rollout is just an uncomfortable detail that only lefties and Ramonas would care about. And speaking of lefties and Ramonas, how does getting Brexit done count as an achievement when it's responsible for exacerbating every single problem the country is currently facing? And, of course, it's something that even people who voted for it are now sufficiently opposed to have completely skewed the polling. So his 3 greatest achievements: getting Brexit done, which was a disaster by pretty much any objective measure. And that, of course, is contingent upon the presumption that it is done, which it isn't. If it was done, they wouldn't be threatening to break international law in order to undo it. The vaccine rollout, a temporary head start we enjoyed before falling back into where we currently reside, in 5th place. These are not opinions, this is just counting. And this claim about Ukraine, which is probably the closest thing he's got to telling the truth, but he glosses very conveniently over the fact that when Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014 and annexed Crimea, Boris Johnson managed to publicly state that Ukraine's problems were the fault of the European Union. So even when he's sailing close to the truth, there's an enormous shadow of past calumny and corrupt conduct looming behind him. It's coming up to 10:30. Please God we shall not look upon his like again. We will, at some point in this morning's proceedings, turn our attention to his successor, Liz Truss, who will deliver, who will deliver, who will deliver. But for now, after your headlines, we will be turning our attention to a question I've been asking in various different ways for the best part of 14 years now, is why do people continue to fall for such an obviously ridiculous man? I haven't actually called you to arms yet, have I? I haven't issued the phone number and the invitation to contribute to the programme. It is a day upon which, as you can probably tell, my dander is up and my tail is bushy, so I don't actually need interruption. But I think in the interest of everybody's sanity, not least Keith's, we should probably take a lot of calls about the question of Boris Johnson's continuing appeal to people. I think off the top of my head, it was, I'd say 62 out of about 180 ministers, parliamentary private secretaries, trade envoys and party chairmen resigned from their positions in July. So 62 out of 180, over a third of the government resigned in protest at Boris Johnson's awfulness. And he just gave a speech that sounded like a lap of honour, citing Cincinnatus as well, who came back for a second term, as I'm sure Johnson is waiting for the colour writers to point out in tomorrow's newspapers. So a third of the government resigns in protest about how awful you are. And you think you've played a blinder. And then you list a catalogue of achievements that are either neither achiever. I've lost the ability to speak. They're either not achievements, or they are blatant lies, or they're ludicrous embellishments, boasting about hiring police after being part of governments that cut the police service to the bone, making claims about 40 hospitals that have been routinely refuted, claiming that we are somehow world leaders on vaccine rollout when we're only 5th in Europe, and on it goes, describing the funds that are available for public spending, when not only has Liz Truss vowed to cut taxes while increasing public spending, something that most 6-year-olds try to do with their pocket money before growing out of at a rate of knots, but also it's a government with debts on a scale that have never been seen before. What are these funds he speaks of that are available for spending stuff? He talked about the rail links, which is a government announced some of which were being abandoned. I mean, it is North Korean in its idiocy. And yet the great pain, the great problem is the continuing commitment of some people to the cause, the belief that he is anything other than, and I think the word for this morning is ridiculous, ridiculously dangerous, or dangerously ridiculous. 10:35 is the time. So possibly, hopefully, improbably, for the very last time, you explain it to me. You explain how a man whose political career is a catalogue of scandal, lie, corruption and sexual incontinence, and I mention that because it used to matter in this country. It's not long ago that the constituents down in Norfolk were trying to get rid of Liz Truss because she, as a married woman, had had an affair with a married man, a fellow Conservative politician. That kind of stuff used to end careers. Just ask Cecil Parkinson. But not anymore. What happened? What you explain it to me. Or indeed explain it to my fictional coma patient who's just woken up after a 20-year snooze and needs to understand how British politics could have been brought so low. Or, of course, explain to me why I'm wrong about everything, and his account of his own premiership and his analysis of his own achievements is actually accurate, and he is actually brilliant, and you're not actually Nadine Dorries. Yes, I know we will have to turn our attention to Liz Truss imminently, but allow me I think I've got another monologue brewing. We might start the phone in after 11 o'clock today, because thinking about the talent available to Liz Truss there with Theo was quite a dispiriting experience. He wants me to tell you that he shouted Theresa May shortly after opening the studio door. We were looking for people that could be loosely described as elder statesmen, or I suppose stateswomen, in the Parliamentary Conservative Party. It takes you back to that cull, doesn't it, before the 2019 election, when Boris Johnson got rid of everybody who, I mean, really, almost everybody who had an IQ in double figures, but anybody who would tell the truth about Brexit. And here's something really interesting. Here is something really interesting, because on that list of possible statespersons, you would have to put Jeremy Hunt, whether you like it or not, in terms of cabinet experience. You would have to, as Theo Usherwood hollered while leaving the studio a few moments ago, you would have to put Theresa May. You'd have to put Michael Gove. Now, here's the really interesting thing about the big picture, in that Johnson got rid of politicians of high calibre who were not prepared to lie about Brexit. So that, in 2019, is why people like Rory Stewart got ejected. It's why people like Philip Hammond, I think, got shown the door. It's why people who, and Hammond, of course, had tried to do a decent job as Chancellor to Theresa May, but no room in the Parliamentary Conservative Party for people like Philip Hammond. I always think that history will look at him with great interest. Historians who weren't alive in this era will look at how a Chancellor of the Exchequer within one party could go from the second highest office in the land to being chucked out on his ear by his own constituency in the space of 5 minutes, in the blink of an eye. They talk about a week being a long time in politics, but Philip Hammond's journey from Chancellor to political oblivion makes Rishi Sunak's look like a slow motion car crash. So Hammond went like that. He went in a jiffy. And, of course, Ken Clarke, who probably would have retired anyway, Anna Soubry, various Conservative politicians of varying talents who were not prepared to lie about Brexit and therefore were got rid of by Boris Johnson. And now you come to the Truss premiership, and who is left in that cabinet? So Hunt survived by lying about Brexit, by, pretending that it would be a good idea or that the will of the people was somehow more important than the fate of the nation. Gove couldn't bring himself to lie about Liz Truss, you see. So he was one of the key liars about Brexit. He was one of the architects of Brexit, one of the absolute loopy-loo liars. So he obviously hung on in 2019, got a job in government, lost it again when his psychodrama with Boris Johnson resurfaced. But he couldn't bring himself to lie about Liz Truss. So Gove has finally run out of road, which means that despite being one of the most experienced ministers available to Liz Truss, she probably won't put him in the cabinet, partly because he backed Sunak. He ran out of road. He couldn't fib anymore about Liz Truss being a good candidate or having any good ideas. And so it's like a sausage slicer. This is a little bit close to what Joe Lycett talked about on Sunday, about being left with the backwash, having got rid of everybody vaguely admirable or vaguely competent, and you're left with absolute dregs. Johnson made Nadine Dorries Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, but don't forget he made Priti Patel Home Secretary. Now, Liz Truss is choosing from an even shallower talent pool than Boris Johnson did, because lying and loyalty are a sausage slicer. You slice off another sausage. Gove's gone. Slice a sausage that looks like Michael Gove's gone. Grant Shapps, Theo shouted as he left the room, to my utter hilarity. But in terms of ministerial experience, Grant Shapps, a man who became wealthy by selling get-rich-quick schemes on the internet under a false name, Grant Shapps is about as close to an elder statesman as Liz Truss has available to her as she assembles her cabinet. Just pause for a moment to think about that. A man who made his fortune selling get-rich-quick schemes on the internet under a selection of made-up names. Something he continued to fib about even after getting into Parliament, even after achieving senior positions in the Conservative Party. That is the calibre of candidate available to Liz Truss. The sausage slicer goes again. And what's she left with? Who's she going to put in her cabinet? That's terrifying. Dominic Grieve, gone, sliced off for telling the truth. Michael Gove, gone, sliced off because he couldn't lie anymore. He hasn't quite got the hang of telling the truth yet, but if he wants to go back to working for Rupert Murdoch, it's probably just as well that he doesn't. But that's what's happened in British politics. That's what happens when you let complete charlatans like Farage into the public space. So he turns lying into something normal. He normalises lying, often lies with a very obvious racist undertone, but it's the lying, not the racism, that lingers even after you've abolished freedom of movement. You've still got the lies. The legacy of lying is that in the short term, it delivers victory. Johnson is the biggest liar of all. We'll have a look in a minute at what the biggest lie was in his farewell speech. I think social care, probably, don't you? The claim to have reformed social care? That's probably the biggest lie, although there is a lot of competition. So until lying is removed from the public space, you have to keep slicing the sausage. You have to keep getting rid of everybody who's not prepared to lie. Boom. Dominic Grieve's gone. Boomf. Anna Soubry's gone. Boomf. Rory Stewart's gone. Boomf. Michael Gove's gone. David Gauke's gone. Not Gove. He doesn't deserve to be in that company. He just won't. He just refused to lie. He wouldn't tell the truth. They're two very different things. And that's why she's left with people like Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman, and she's not even got Dominic Raab. I don't think he's just too stupid to know what day it is. I don't think he's even got a place in this particular game or this sausage slicing exercise. He's got Kwasi Kwarteng. So inexperienced, even if they have talent that they've miraculously managed to hide from us so far in their political careers. The lack of experience at a time of epic national crisis is incredible. Incredible. And these are people who are formed by those dodgy think tanks I keep telling you about. Those ludicrous lobby groups masquerading as think tanks funded by dark money. designed solely to protect the interests of dark money, which is how they can end up talking about cutting taxes and increasing public spending at the same time. None of it makes any sense. Here's someone who gets it. To be a Tory is to have to lie about Brexit, James, every day. The party's not going to suddenly wake up to reality. Brexit is the Conservatives. They must lie about Brexit, otherwise they're finished. The future is here. They are now UKIP. I would agree with every single word of that analysis, actually. And that's why I don't see how she can appoint people to her... Well, she probably will try. But how do you unite a party that's built on lies, still built on lies, still built on denying reality? Boris Johnson's farewell speech, a masterclass in denying observable reality. Denying observable reality from the steps of Downing Street. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is not normal. This is not the ordinary cut and thrust of party politics. This is exceptional and terrifying. Denying observable reality from the steps of Downing Street, and the new one, Liz Truss, is continuity. Yesterday describing him as her friend, listing his bogus achievements and then waiting for people to start clapping because they didn't start clapping naturally or immediately. She is the continuity candidate, which means the lying and the denying on the steps of Downing Street is going nowhere. Although in Liz Truss's defence, when I heard this bit of her speech,
I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver.
It did make me think of a great public figure from our past, from our shared past. And I spent, after the show yesterday, I was racking my brains to think who it was. It was just, have another listen to it and see if you get it. It just reminded me of a great, much loved figure from British folklore.
I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver.
And then on the tube home later, it finally came to me.
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat, and his black and white cat.
It's going to take a while to shrug off the ghost of Joe Lycett's appearance on that programme on Sunday morning, because I'm just reading the Sun's editorial this morning, and the first thing I think is I wonder if Joe Lycett wrote this. I'm very right-wing and I think she's brilliant. Here it is. The crisis engulfing us needs radical solutions and a radical Prime Minister. In Liz Truss, we believe Britain has found one. That's literally what Joe Lycett would have said on the telly if he'd hung around for a little bit longer. We talked yesterday about why it was so brilliant, but if you missed it, that's why everyone's got their knickers in such an almighty twist. It's because everything that came out of his mouth could easily have come out of the mouths of the sort of half-wits and jokers who were routinely wheeled out on television programmes to stick up for the Tories. I'm very right-wing and I think she's brilliant. That's why they're all so cross. Daily Mail put it on the front page. They're cross with Jonathan Pye today, a fictional journalist. The people who use woke as a pejorative and snowflake as an insult have moved in the 24 hours from being furious with a real comedian doing satire to being furious with a real comedian pretending to be a journalist. And on we go. And of course the long list of characters who pop up all over the television and radio, essentially doing with a straight face what Joe Lycett did with his tongue in his cheek, is almost endless. I think Tim Montgomery, one of the very worst offenders, a man who was chief of staff to Ian Duncan Smith and somehow gets invited onto radio and television programmes to provide his political insights. I think he'll be popping up on LBC later today, so don't miss that, whatever you do. He's a senior contributor to GBB's, you know, so my goodness me, you must hang on every word that drips out of his mouth. 11:05 is the time. Loyalty to Johnson, belief in Johnson, what's it going to be? Where does it come from? Explain it. The country is driven down the middle now. And one useful divide, if we were to park Brexit just for a moment, one useful divide is Boris Johnson. People who believe him and people who don't. Or, and I'm fascinated by this, a possible hinterland. People who know that he doesn't tell the truth but love him anyway. They, in many ways, are the most fascinating of all, and they're most welcome on this programme. You know he's a big fat liar, but you really like him and you're going to vote for him anyway. In America, they did a thing at a Trump rally recently where there's two brilliant guys. I forget their name. It'll come to me in a minute. And they do kind of Dennis Pennis, Jonathan Pye type stuff by pretending to be journalists. And they find people who will say things like, in fact, they did find one who said exactly this. If Hillary Clinton took secret documents, she should be tried for treason. And then they said, well, what if Donald Trump took them? No, he shouldn't be tried for treason because he's a patriot. So the kind of supporter that knows their hero is doing bad things, but doesn't just forgive it, but completely ignores it on the grounds that they are patriotic or whatever the word is. So it is that hinterland. Is there anyone in that hinterland? So there's those of us that know Boris Johnson is incredibly dishonest, the most dishonest politician, hopefully, that we'll ever see in this country. And there are those who believe that he's not. Yeah, me too, but they exist. You know, they'll be all over your telly for a couple of days yet. And then there must be loads of voters in the middle who know that he's a big liar, but like it or don't mind. Working on the presumption that I don't know whether you're going to ring me at the moment. Do you know people like that? Do you know people who know he's a liar but vote for him anyway? 0345 6060 973. And just to keep that theme going, what do you think, from your knowledge, your experience, what was the biggest lie he told in his farewell speech? Got Brexit done, vaccine rollout, economic strength, funds available for public spending, 40 hospitals, police, nurses, teachers, what was the biggest lie he told? I'm giving you social care, but I'm just doing that off the top of my head. If you work in social care and you can put some flesh upon the bones of my suspicion that that's another almighty lie, then I'd love to take your call. 8 minutes after 11 is the time. Jack's in Welshpool. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James. I'll tell you what, when I was listening to that Boris Johnson farewell speech, I felt like Sir Humphrey Appleby listening to a Jim Hacker speech.
Yes.
Like, it was just, oh, dude, shut up, Boris. Get on with it. Just say farewell and go, because literally it's pointless at this point, him talking about that. But
there was no contrition, actually. Just to pause for a minute. What was, and of course, Yes Minister was based on the experiences of Anthony Jay and Jonathan Lynn in politics. I mean, it was more real than anybody cares to admit. A lot of the famous exchanges in there almost certainly happened, or as near as damn it happened, in real life. But it was absence of contrition. You know, he's supposed to be someone that can read a room, and he's literally just been slung out the door, and he's doing a lap of honour instead of even pretending to be contrite or pretending to be sorry. It was bizarre, wasn't it?
It's absolutely bizarre. Like, from the whole, it's like from as soon as it's like, I mean, he took ages to say that he was resigning in the first place.
Well, he was hanging on.
To Theresa May did. He was hanging on as long as possible, and then because my main point that I wanted to make was that when you were talking about the Boris Johnson fans waving their flags and so on and so forth and ignoring all the lies and so on, I want to make the comparison. It might be an unfair one, but could we make the comparison between Boris Johnson fans and the idiots in America that still wave the goddamn Confederate flag? Because those people, they keep on waving the Confederate flag after 150 years of being told, you lost, you're losers, and you are wrong. Because the Confederacy only stood to mainly keep the power of slavers. That's all it was for. And yet these people...
That's it. MI6 have got him. MI6 have got him. I knew that was going to happen at some point. This Liz Truss's first action as Prime Minister is to order the security services to scramble the James O'Brien programme live on LBC. Can we make sure he's okay? I hope he didn't fall down a well. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. Quite a few of you are pointing out that he said something about they changed the rules halfway through. Do you know, I actually missed that bit, because I was asking Keith what he was having for breakfast. What they changed? What's he? Is that the biggest lie? Did he say that in his farewell speech? Can we check the tape? Did he say that? They're back. Hang on, have we got Jack back? Jack, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
No, it was the security services, mate, trying to scramble my programme.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and try and stop my views, because I'm incredibly important.
You're probably woke.
But. Exactly. I'm incredibly woke.
So what's the parallel? I'm very right wing. I think Liz Truss is great. What's the parallel? I mean, you're talking about people who just can never ever accept reality, and in this case, it's the American Civil War and the abolition of slavery.
Exactly, yeah. It's an absolute ignorance.
But what do they get in return? If I'm still waving the Confederate flag, I'm dreaming of a day when slavery comes back and I can own human beings again and wipe out all my labour costs on my plantations. I'm paraphrasing loosely. What do you get in return for keeping this dream alive? What's the payoff? What's the prize? I've never understood that.
I've never understood it either, but for some reason they keep on holding on to it. And I think but also they say that it's not about slavery. They say, no, it's not about slavery at all. It's about the traditions the Confederacy had, to which everyone goes, no, the traditions of the Confederacy were slavery. There's nothing else to it. But they're so ignorant by the fact that that's what that's what the traditions were.
Yes.
And they just won't take it. It's like, take your word for it.
Then
apparently we're the idiots.
Yeah, well, we are the idiots. We're woke idiots. You should know that by now. Thank you, Jack. The good liars, they're called in America, or there's the other fella as well. The ones I'm thinking, Jordan Klepper, who do amazing work. The parallels with America are right. I don't know. I've got the history to comment on whether that parallel with Confederate revisionists is acute. But what's the payoff? What do you get in return for insisting that Boris Johnson didn't break rules, didn't break laws, didn't lie to you, didn't cheat on his wife? I mean, what do you get in return for that? That's where I find the parallels with Trump. And with Trump, I think you get an endorsement of your racism. You get a free pass for your ancient bigotries, whether it's anti-women with abortion legislation or whether it's a form of white supremacy. I don't, for the record, think you get that with Johnson, but maybe I'm not paying attention. Mike's in Frome. Mike, what would you like to say?
Oh, God, MI6 are listening. Oh, my God.
Be careful.
I know. Boy, they're not going to like this.
Go on.
If you tell a big enough lie and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it.
Yeah, I think that's true.
The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, or military consequences of the lie. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Joseph Goebbels said that. Now, I'm not comparing the Nazi Party to the Conservative Party.
No, you're comparing one propagandist to another, and you know,
exactly.
There it is, whether you're talking about enemies of the people on the front page of the Daily Mail or whether you're attempting to portray an entire people as being subhuman or inferior. The tactics you deploy are the same, even if what's at stake is very, very different. So what's the lie then here? What is the lie?
Well, there's so many, and that's the point. And I think what's really interesting is what you said just before the end of the hour is, this is a really bad phrase, the way the Conservatives have sliced off their own sausage.
Yes. I think that's a brilliant phrase. What are you talking about? Everyone's a critic. No one's going to forget that in a hurry, are they?
But they're peeling off. And what I've noticed on your show in recent weeks is how many people have rung in, me included, hands up. You know, I'm a lifelong Conservative voter, and all of a sudden, one or two of the lies, you just go, oh no, stop it now. I mean, just stop it. You know, and I do think people are peeling away. And if you look at the people that you were just talking about, who's really in it? Who's still really, really in this?
Yeah.
Look at America. Look at who Goebbels was targeting. He was targeting people, and Trump does the same, people that do feel isolated. They feel left out.
Frightened.
They feel like
But they're not.
frightened.
But they're not. They're usually relatively wealthy boomers, the Conservative membership.
You would think so.
Yeah.
You would think so. But then
they can still be frightened
you know,
of everything, I suppose.
And it's also human nature, James. At some point, how far down a rabbit hole do you go that you can get yourself out, because you've got to come out and say, hold your hands up and say, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult in human nature. We all know it. How many times do we, you know, stand by our own little white lies? When you're in a really big one, there is a percentage of people that, unfortunately, as they recognised in America, they are lost for a generation. They are not coming back. Now, how many we have here, I don't think is as big.
Well,
you see what I mean?
Fingers crossed. I do. It's a really acute analysis, and it makes the task of uniting the party almost impossible for Liz Truss. The only way she can unite the party is to slice the sausage even more, right? Until you're only left with people who are still lying or still believing the lie.
Can I have a stab at the biggest lie from this morning?
Yeah.
That nobody talks about it. This one new nuclear power station every year for 10 years. Rolls-Royce haven't built one yet. It's on a tabletop model. It's on a computer screen. It's not real. Stop it. Just stop it.
I didn't know. I think I missed that. I told you I couldn't keep up. Seriously, I'm only one man with a big biro, so I shall call my autobiography. I missed the nuclear power bit, and I missed a bit about him saying, did he say something about they changed the rules halfway through? Did he say that in the speech? I'll find out. Mr. Meg points out sausage slicing is otherwise known as the law of diminishing returns. I said I would check the tape during the hiatus there to find out whether he did say something about the rules being broken halfway through. Well, this isn't the BBC, as you know, so I don't have a crack team of researchers waiting at my every beck and call. Actually, I've got to have to stop that line now, because there are some of my newly appointed colleagues on LBC do have enormous teams of researchers and producers waiting on their every whim and beck and call. But when I say I'm going to check on something during the break, I get handed a transcript of the speech and a highlighter pen. So if I'm not paying attention during the next couple of calls, it's because I'm going through the transcript of the speech, trying to find mention of him claiming that the rules were changed halfway through, and that's why he's had to leave the job of Prime Minister. In fact, I'm already doing it. You can tell by the way my voice has started sounding like Liz Truss. Is she reading something is she reading something else? No, anyway, we digress slightly. I want you to talk to me about one of two things. The appeal of a proven liar. The continuing appeal of a proven liar. And it's a serious conversation as well as a potentially amusing one, because they're talking about a comeback, and he will, if anybody ever is prepared to try to make a comeback from abject disgrace, it would be Boris Johnson. How can a proven liar, a man who presided over bloodshed, death in this country on an untold scale, how does that work? Early caller there a moment ago down in Frome just mentioned Goebbels. I mean, it is a propaganda coup on a scale the like of which we never thought we'd see in Britain. So can you explain it? I'm supposed to be writing another book, which now becomes almost impossible to resist the importuning of my publishers, because I've kept saying, let's just wait until he's gone and then we can have a look at it. I'm buying myself time. Luckily, on this occasion, I haven't made the mistake that I made with my last book and spent an advance before I'd written anything, and it rather sort of focuses the mind. But I can't start writing it until I've got a better grasp of this simple bit of the question. How? Now that he's been shown to be completely and utterly naked, do so many people in the crowd continue to cheer the Emperor's new clothes? 0345 6060973. If you're in the category of people that cheer the Emperor's new clothes, I accept this is uncomfortable for you and you're unlikely to ring him, because he's naked, and somewhere deep inside you know that he's naked, but you're just not prepared to admit it to yourself yet, so you're highly unlikely to come on the radio and argue the opposite. But if you know that he's naked but you still like him, sounds a bit weird, that's a fascinating hinterland to me. 0345 6060973. And then I guess the rest of us are just left to speculate. You've got friends, you've got family, you know people who still like a liar. They still admire the clothes of a naked emperor. They still insist that he's their man, even as he rides roughshod over every standard and modicum of decency that our democracy permits. 11:22. Andrew's in Preston. Andrew, what would you like to say? Biggest lie, or how does he get away with it?
How does he get away with it, James?
Go on.
Good morning. So I work as a part-time carer and also a part-time teacher.
Oh, yes.
And this morning I was watching Boris standing there being clapped by all these people, as you say, cheering almost for the, for the ex-Prime Minister.
Yes.
And it was only 18 months ago people were standing outside their homes clapping, cheering for me and for the NHS and care staff. I earn minimum wage, just above minimum wage, £9 an hour.
Right.
I work on a Saturday, I get 40 pence more.
Crikey.
And it's unbelievable that Boris can stand there and say he's fixed social care.
Yeah.
How on earth? Well, it's just upsetting. It's just a lie, and it's just how are my colleagues and myself going to cope in these next few months with the increasing energy costs, etc., etc. It's just you just got to. Well, what's got to do, James? You tell me.
I don't know. I'm just wondering whether or not there's a sort of, sometimes with him, there's a tiny nugget of plausibility from which he constructs an enormous facade of falsehood. isn't there?
Yeah.
Do you know, usually for propaganda to work, you need a little... And I don't even know what the nugget of plausibility would be when it comes to... Is it because the money that they ring-fenced for social care, or that was supposed to be going to social care, has needed to be redirected to the NHS because of COVID, so that he can't be... Maybe it is just that, and he knows it's nonsense, and he says it anyway.
People are leaving the care profession in the droves.
Are they?
So I worked through lockdown 40, 50 hours a week, caring for vulnerable adults in their own homes.
Thank you for doing that, Andrew.
Thank you. But yesterday, I visited a care home where my elderly auntie is at the moment,
right.
and I decided I applied for a job yesterday in this home. It's about 50 pence an hour more, but it's not about the money at all.
Well, it helps,
but they have it certainly does, even in Preston. But they have so many jobs available. I just asked at the reception of this care home. I thought be a nice environment to work. And they said, yes, we have jobs. When can you start? Have you got your DBS, etc. So they're crying out for people to work in the care sector, and for Boris to stand there and say it's fixed.
Yeah.
It is, hey, hurrah, it's fixed.
And I guess if you don't know, then you don't know, do you? You cheer. You don't know. You go, it's great. Yay, we won the war. This is like North Korea has to keep all alternative media out. But you'd think they're setting up their own TV stations now to pretend that he's brilliant and he's a genius, and they've even got senior contributors, Andrew. I don't know if you knew that. You can be a senior contributor to one of these TV stations. What
have we got to look forward to, James? What have we got to look forward to? Liz Truss, I really want her to do well. I really hope there's going to be...
You have to hope. Even if you're hoping against hope, you have to hope, don't you?
You have to hope, and I hope. And, what do we give her? 100 days? I don't know. Just needs a bit of time. But she's already been a proven liar. Well,
in order to do anything good for the country, she needs to abandon the promises that she made during her leadership campaign. So she's already a liar, whichever way it goes. Man alive. Well, anyway, on the plus side, Andrew, she will deliver.
Yeah, of course she will. And deliver.
She will. Your money or your life. Oh, God, that's not even funny. 11:27 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Andrew Lombard writes, James O'Brien in capital letters. Please, but don't worry, he's not from Idiot's Corner. Please, can you confirm the rumour that Johnson dislocated his shoulder while patting himself on the back? Very good. No. 27. One rumour came in yesterday on the programme, which I almost got distracted by. You mustn't do that to me. You mustn't send me things that aren't true but just might be. About linked to Johnson's marriage. I'm sure you probably saw people speculating about that online as well. But don't put it in my inbox, lads. All right? And lasses. Ricky is in Cambridge. Ricky, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hi there, James. Yes, well, I had a bit of a kind of an outsider's perspective because I'm Danish, actually, and it made me laugh when you talked about the Emperor's new clothes, because that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's Hans Christian Andersen, isn't it?
Yeah, it is Hans Christian Andersen. And I think you realised it was the little child calling him out, So, but I suppose one of the things that I kind of noticed about Johnson all the way through, also when he was mayor of London, was that there was that notion of being a lovable rogue that I never really met before I came to Britain.
Is that right?
So that ability to get away with it, and actually that is an admired quality, so that if you get away with it, it's something to be admired. And I just don't think that we have got that same idea in Denmark, particularly not about politicians. They're kind of seen as having to be something slightly different. So,
do you have problems with forgive my ignorance, but do you have problems with the far right in Denmark?
Yeah, but I suppose also we got proportional representation. So it's kind of consensus politics rather than So it has definitely been polarised within the last 2 years.
And are your far right leaders not demagogic? Demagogish? Are they not kind of?
I wouldn't. I think. There has been a few attempts, but I think actually it's not in the Danish psyche. Actually, politics is quite important, and politicians are someone to be they are representative of the people, so they have been given a very important mandate. And if they don't do their job, they're kind of held to account in a different way. And probably the tabloids are not as vicious in Denmark as well. I mean, I haven't lived there for 30 years, but that's how.
No, well, they won't be, because Rupert Murdoch doesn't have any media in Denmark. You can track stuff, whether it's climate change or the rise of the far right, to the countries where Rupert Murdoch has toeholds. So it's Australia,
definitely.
America and the United Kingdom that are suffering from the worst excesses of this sort of thing. You have tributates like Viktor Orban, but the nature of a Murdoch-infused, infiltrated, influenced media is you don't notice it when you're in it, Rikke. That's the point. It's like a boiling frog.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose, and I think that, I mean, he gets elected on those qualities. I don't think he really got elected because people did know Johnson before he came into his, into becoming a prime minister.
Yeah.
I mean, so there was a really good track record of getting away with it. He's always done that.
I suppose maybe you can vote for someone who's got a history of getting away with it, because it's compelling. Say what you like about him, he gets away with it. Let's put him in charge of everything, and then he'll get away with that as well.
Exactly.
Someone's just said it's like putting Michelle in Yorkshire. It's like putting Derek Trotter in charge of Parliament. But Derek, and the problem is those of us that don't find him likeable overlook the fact that so many people do. And I'm lucky in a sense in that way, because I did like him briefly in the sort of last half of the last decade. The decade before last, actually, up until that 2008 mayoral election, I kind of fell for his spiel because I wasn't really paying attention. And it's all very well us sitting here conducting a political post-mortem, but all we're really doing is expressing our confusion at people who still fall for the spiel. You never did, but I did.
No, but is it not also something about, I'm kind of a teacher background, is it not also something about how we question authority in the class system? So we,
or how we don't question authority in the class system, in fact.
And again, the Danish system is very, very different, just in terms of kind of, we haven't got school uniforms, we don't line up, we call teachers by our first name,
Interesting.
So it's much more equitable in terms of authority, and I think there's something.
Well,
about
you recognise that. You recognise equitable. You recognise a fundamental equality that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg would simply never have been heard of if it was practised in this country, and to a lesser extent Johnson. And the idea that this school in Windsor can produce double-figure number of MPs because by coincidence it somehow attracts people possessed of such an epic skill set and talent base that they are the best qualified people to be Prime Minister in every generation since the 17th century or the 18th century. It is actually comical and laughable, and perhaps you need to be an outsider to appreciate the full scale of the absurdity. Won't some gift the gifty gears to see ourselves as others see us? Paul writes, I liked his cavalier attitude once. Now I detest the despicable chancer. Fair play to you, Paul. I found the line. It's only about the fourth or fifth line of the speech. That must be why I missed it. I was adjusting my hair. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. What does he mean when he says that? The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And then he embarked upon the sort of speech you'd expect a man who'd been Prime Minister for 10 years and delivered untold riches and benefits to his country to deliver, rather than a man who's been Prime Minister for 3 years and presided over calumny after catastrophe after disaster. What did he mean when he said that? They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And I'll tell you something else that intrigues me. The phone lines are open, by the way, if you want to join in. It's one of those odd mornings where my ponderings are more than enough to see us through till 1 o'clock, but I do like listening to you. So if you can answer any of these questions, they're not rhetorical. What was he talking about when he said they changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now? What do you think he was talking about? I remember they tried to change the rules when Owen Paterson was caught with his trousers down, metaphorically speaking. They tried to change the rules to let their crony off the hook. They tried to rip up the whole parliamentary standards book after Paterson broke it. I think was probably the beginning of the end, wasn't it? They did what? Jacob Rees-Mogg was put in charge of it, inevitably. And when I talk about the shallowness of the pool from which Liz Truss is picking her cabinet, it's important to point out that Jacob Rees-Mogg is still in it. That's how shallow it is. He was put in charge of the Save Owen Paterson campaign, which was the beginning of the end for Boris Johnson. But she's got so little talent to choose from, and he is one of the best loyal liars. That's what you need, loyal liars. So he'll probably get a job in the new cabinet. But that's the only thing I can think about where rules were changed. What do you think he's talking about there when he says the baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race? They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. 0345, seriously, 0345 6060 973. We've had the claim that he fixed social care blown up by one caller. Feel free to add to that. He managed to say thank you to his dog, but not to his wife, which seemed characteristic, I thought. I don't know whether you picked up on that, because I've got the transcript in front of me now. I'm doing all my own research on the programme today. He said thank you to his dog, but not to his wife. That seems to me to be the mark of the man. Don't you agree? So who did you say thank you to today during that ludicrous speech? Well, my dog. What about your wife? Oh, no, forgot her. Sorry. Yeah. The police numbers, there's some fairly questionable claims there. 13,790 more police on the streets. I'm sure that bit's true, but this is a government, this is a party that between 2010 and 2019, to the best of my knowledge, got rid of about 20,500 police officers. So he's boasting about a shortfall when his party came into office to when he left office. He's boasting about a shortfall of 12,000 officers. There are 12,000 fewer police officers now than there were when the Conservatives came to power in 2010. So I don't think he can have that one, can he? 50,000 nurses by the end of this parliament. That's 50,000 new nurses. It's gone up 23 and just shy of 24,000 since he came into office, but that's not even halfway to the figure that's needed. Are they going to be able to find 26,247 new nurses by 2024, by December 2024? And how many of them are going to be coming from overseas? Which is absolutely fine by me, but an awful lot of people who voted for Boris Johnson felt there were too many foreign people working in the NHS. So that is a questionable achievement, a questionable claim. 6,000 more GPs by 2025. He didn't mention that. That was another government pledge. That figure has gone up by 738 since the end of December 2019. And how many of them are full-time or part-time, I do not know. How many, here's a little quiz for you, Boris Johnson fans. Of the 40 new hospitals that he said would be built by the end of the decade, how many were set to be entirely new hospitals? In fact, I'm going to be cheeky now. I'm going to ask Malik, who's in Bristol and waiting to talk about something completely different. Malik, would you like to have a guess at how many of the 40 new hospitals Boris Johnson pledged to build by the end of the decade and was still boasting about earlier today, how many of them are or will be entirely new hospitals?
That's going to be a zero.
No.
Zero.
No, you ingrate, you hater, you remoaning lefty. 3 out of 40 hospitals will actually be, if they get built, entirely new hospitals. I think one of the 40 opened last year, but not one of the brand new ones. A further 6 are currently under construction. So what the hell he's talking about when he's still boasting about 40 new hospitals is beyond me. But that's not why you rang in. Tell me why you rang in and what you want to say, Malik.
I think Boris, I love calling him that. I think he does have a point when he says that we changed the rules midway.
Go on.
Because he's always been like this. He's been like this when he was elected mayor of London. He's been an MP. He saw his chance with Brexit. He's going all over the country in that bus, covered with a lie, and he's just lied through his teeth all this time. He's had 50 different scandals.
Yes.
During his time as the prime minister, and all of a sudden, because he let his mate, have a job, and just because he's a there's a bit of sexual assault occasionally.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now he has to leave the job. That's not fair. He's always been like this. He's always done things like
so
that.
that's what he means. This would not have ended any other premiership. He can kind of ignore the cumulative effect of everything he's done. Even if you only start with Patterson, there's probably 20 to 30 things on that list. Or go back to the proroguing, the 3 Ps, proroguing parties, Patterson are the 3 biggies for me. But the idea that he thinks he's going solely because of the Chris Pincher affair. And that's not fair, because what did I do? All I did was give a job to a bloke who's a bit handsy. That's not the end of the world. So that's what he thinks. That's the rule he's talking about, perhaps.
Yeah, so he's been hard done by. I mean,
I think you're right.
What's the big deal?
I think you're right. I think that's the narcissist in him, isn't it? That's the idea of everything now is dedicated to exoneration or exculpation, and that is how he does it. He goes, that's all I'm being done for. Whereas obviously most of the 62 members of government, over a third of his entire administration who walked the plank, were not walking the plank about the Chris Pincher affair. They were walking the plank about the culmination. That vote of confidence that he squeaked through happened before the Chris Pincher affair emerged, but he needs to construct a narrative that allows him to cling to his own self-regard, and that narrative is they've all pretended to care passionately about that one incident, whereas the real narrative, the truth, is that it was a straw that broke the camel's back. Not even a necessarily massive straw in the great scheme of things, but enough to break the camel's back. That's the whole point of the figure of speech, isn't it?
Yeah, because the plug hole's in the sink and you've had a leak, and it's just been leaking all this time, and then all of a sudden it overflowed.
The last drop causes the ceiling downstairs to collapse. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's like the hospital roofs, by the way.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've lost count of how many hospital roofs are set to fall in because they're unfit for purpose. But at least he's building 40 new hospitals, brackets, actually 3, close brackets. None of which, as far as I'm aware, have actually been completed. But that's not going to stop Boris Johnson boasting about it in his farewell speech, is it? There's one phone. You can grab Malik's phone. Thank you, Malik. You can grab his phone line if you're quick. But before that, I've got some important business to do. This is thanks to Nick, who's up in Darlington. There is a park in Darlington called Skern Park. I'm not familiar with it, but there is currently a man wheeling his bin around Skern Park, cleaning up all the rubbish, listening to this programme on his portable radio. And while I do not know your name, sir, I would like to wish you an extremely good morning and thank you for tuning in to this radio programme. So if you're currently cleaning up in Skern Park in Darlington, if I had any music to play, I would dedicate the next song to you. And on we go. Listen, it's hard to choose one's words carefully, but I think loyalty to a brother from Rachel Johnson is not an entirely inadmirable attribute, even if the brother is as irredeemably awful as hers. I sometimes feel sorry for my sister, who thankfully has never asked to defend me in public, but I can't imagine it's much fun to be doing that, so try not to be too horrible to her on the old social medias. Fill your boots with the other fella, though. I'm not quite sure who he was, but Boris Johnson was incredibly hard-working. That's Joe Lycett levels of comedy. Lee's in Manchester. Lee, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. I'll tell you a secret, shall I, Lee?
Go on.
Whenever anybody asks me how I am from a sort of work-life point of view, since 2016, my response is generally, well, great for business, bad for the soul. And there we are, It's for 3 hours every day, I've got the best job in the world. And then for the other 21 hours, of course, I'm a citizen of these islands, and all of the repercussions and ramifications of that reality weigh heavily upon my scrawny shoulders. But thank you for asking, Lee.
I see where you're coming from with that. Well, it's just following on. I think you mentioned something earlier about why do people who know that Boris Johnson lies still support him?
Yeah.
I've got a bit of theory in this, because I've got friends stroke acquaintances that will defend him no matter what. They know he's a barefaced liar, and he admits it. Yeah. And it's usually the same spiel that, well, it would be worse under Labour because the right-wing media portray that Labour would be worse, even though if Labour are in charge of the country with the debt levels as it is now, the right-wing media would demand a coup d'etat for Labour if they were responsible for that. Then you get lines like, well, the best leaders take risks, even though they lie. At least Boris Johnson's taking risks,
right?
And then you get them to try and get them to elaborate, and they just go back to the whataboutery with Labour, or imagine, Corbyn, Keir Starmer, etc. And then when you get them on the ropes and they've got nothing else to utter, they utter the same line that the first call you took when Boris Johnson was announced as a Tory leader.
Yeah.
They utter that line. Well, he annoys the likes of you.
Yeah.
And that's all they've got. Boris Johnson is a lad that annoys all the wokes and all the liberals, and that's why I'll support him. And he's a better alternative than what Labour could ever offer.
I mean, we need to...
no evidence.
I think you might be right. And I've already seen people saying Liz Truss is upsetting all the right people. And it's a phrase that we've all used. Well, I may have used it. You probably haven't. You're too clever. But you can understand the appeal of it when you see people having a... on Sunday you might have said Joe Lycett has annoyed all the right people, but when you're talking about politics and the people that this politician is annoying are the people who care about the truth and standards and ethics, it's a very, very odd thing to celebrate, isn't it? It's a very odd thing to celebrate.
Exactly. You're talking about the leader of the country, supposed to be running the country. I think I want more in my Prime Minister than somebody that just upsets a load of liberals and a load of woke people. I want somebody to actually run the country and run it to the best of their ability.
Yeah, well, he did run it to the best of his ability. He did run it to the best of his ability, Lee. That's
true.
That's the problem. Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's because I rarely get beyond that. I love him because he upsets people like you. So, well, what do you mean? What do you get out of it? If you're sinking, imagine we're on a ship together and the ship is just about to sink beneath the waves and I'm going, oh, this is awful. Are you really standing there going, no, isn't it? It's great. You're really upset. We're all about to drown and you really hate it. I mean, what does it mean, Lee? What does it mean?
Exactly. And then it just goes back to you try and get to, because I'm one of these, I don't mind being educated. I usually try and say to my friends that do support Boris Johnson, okay, tell me what he's done that's good.
Yeah.
And there's always, they'll say, well, he delivered Brexit. Yeah, but there's issues with Northern Ireland, issues with trade deals, there's issues with passport control. Yeah, but he still delivered it.
But over half the country don't want it anymore.
Exactly.
So it's an odd thing to boast about.
Like you mentioned the vaccine rollout. Like you said, we're now gone down in the standings.
Faith, no, we were ahead of the curve. We were ahead of Europe from, and I'll get this right, because I think it's important. I think we had about 4 or 5 months when we could realistically have claimed, because it was true to say it, that we were doing better than the rest of Europe. I mean, the first country to approve a COVID vaccine, certainly, and then from the 8th of December 2020, so you've got December, January, February, March, April, 5 months, and then by May 2021, we'd been overtaken by other countries, and we now sit at about 5th, although it's a fluctuating line. So you say the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, that would be true for 5 of the last, I don't know, nearly, say...
18 months, 2 years.
Yeah, bit just shy of 2 years. It would be untrue for more of that period than it was true for. So that's not an achievement either, really.
No, but that's what they hold on to. And then when you've got these supporters on the ropes, and you try and they just say, well, it'd be better at least it's better now what Labour would have done, because Labour would have still kept us in lockdown. It's like, but you've got no evidence about that. Don't
need evidence, do I? I just need something to shout. It's like we've turned the whole country into PMQs, and as long as you've got some gibberish that like you're Jonathan Gullis, that ludicrous individual who just sort of sits...
the veil.
And he just shouts all sorts of nonsense, say, blah, 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 at Keir Starmer, and because it's noisy and it's... he's frightened of silence. He sort of comes away thinking he's scored a zinger, scored a hit, and that's what the country's been turned into. Doesn't matter what you're shouting, as long as you've got something to shout. He got Brexit done, and the Prime Minister has turned us into a sort of, I don't know what it would be, into a sort of fight outside a nightclub at chucking out time.
Yeah, I agree.
Happy days. Happy days. Thank you, Lee. Mind how you go. Speaking of nightclubs, Manchester, land of my youth, where I did all my early clubbing. 11:55 is the time. Alistair is in Chipping Norton. Alistair, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I want to answer the question that you posed about the appeal of Boris Johnson. And in particular, I want to ask, why do some people think that Boris Johnson is a great orator?
Yes.
I mean, this morning on the radio, I heard somebody say that he was the Aston Martin of oratory. And, I mean, personally, I think his speeches are just full of extravagant flannel and bluster, but they do contain some features which I think delude a number of people into believing that actually in them there is some kind of substance. So I listened to his speech this morning, and I tried to make a list of those features, and I think you can find them in most of his speeches. Now, the first one is this enormous energy of the delivery. You know, he is 100% confident. There's no qualification, there's no nuance, there's no complexity at all. He keeps it simple. Secondly, I do think that his accent, his posh public school accent, has an effect on some people. If you take, I mean, you often use the term forelock tugging. Well, I think that forelock tugging is part of the DNA of some sections of the population, and that may have an effect. Next, it's patriotic white noise. You always get that, and you got that in the speech this morning. Britain is once again standing tall in the world. Next, it's throwing...
That makes people feel good. Makes people feel briefly good about themselves, their country, their home, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly, and he knows that. He absolutely knows that. And then throwing impressive figures about. Now, the huge confidence which he throws these impressive figures about makes it less likely that people will check up on them. The next thing, and I think this is really important, jokes that make people laugh. And that appeals to another section of people who want to be entertained rather than informed. I mean, the jokes about Larry and Dylan and bouncing about in his space hopper that we got. And I'm sure there's a lot more, but finally I identified classical references, you know, that make him appear scholarly and wise, like the one about Titinius this morning.
It wasn't Titinius, actually. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I'm going to correct you on your otherwise absolutely scintillating analysis. It was one that begins with C. The one who went back to his Cincinnatus, is it? I don't know.
Ending in IUS.
Well, it's like Rhys Mogg and his dictionary of cute quotations, isn't it? That he even talks about having on his desk, because you can convince people not privileged enough to have had very expensive educations that you're very clever by dropping in relatively shallow references to things that they haven't heard of before. I'll tell you what, T.S. Eliot once said, Alistair, people can't cope with too much reality. I think that underpins a lot of what you've just said.
Yes, absolutely.
And there it is. And when you put it like that, two things happen. Number one, it is clear why people will lap it up, whether it's the forelock tugging element or the preference of entertainment over information and distraction from reality being a more attractive proposition than explanation of reality. And number two, it is so formulaic, so plodding, so predictable.
It's absolutely formulaic. It's a recipe.
Yes, it's exactly a recipe.
I don't think people realise that, actually.
Nor do I.
He's ticking the points off as he's composing his speech.
And it's also pedestrian. Once you pull back, you're like Toto in The Wizard of Oz, you see. That's what you've done in this phone call. You have pulled back the curtain to reveal the blustering old geezer pulling all the levers and the buttons to create the idea of omnipotence. Right. Thank you, Alistair.
Cheers.
And that's from the heart of Cameron country as well. In Chipping Norton.
Bye.
Cheerio.